Hello, Sami Abdul. Today our subject is the current escalation in Palestine between the Palestinians and Israelis. 3 rockets were fired by Palestinians in Lebanon yesterday, and we're going to cover these subjects or the subjects related to this escalation as brief as possible and as clear as possible. It's come to my attention that many people don't really understand the mechanics of these wars between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Because most people don't know how Israel was created, because the history of Palestine is never told in its reality, in its truthfulness. To begin with, you have to fix a misconception in your head. Israel was not created at all by the efforts of a few Jews who came from Europe, and they didn't win their war in 1948. They lost to the Palestinians. The Palestinians won that war. Israel was created by the Arab states. Of course, this needs to show you how. It needs many sessions in itself, which I'm not going to get into now. But you have to remember, Israel was created by the Arab states, and thus the Arab states are capable of eliminating Israel, and they are capable of keeping it alive, and they want it alive for many different reasons. So in effect, the Palestinians, there was never an Arab-Israeli conflict. It was always Palestinian-Israeli, and the Arab states were on the side of the Israelis throughout. So it is Palestinians against the Arab states and Israel. So when you throw 3 rockets from Lebanon, you have to take that into consideration. Palestinians have had one of 3 choices. They can either control the Arab state that they live in order to be able to fight Israel from across the borders, or they have to accept the position of hostage in these states, where the states themselves use the Palestinians. They use their military capabilities, which in a nutshell is bravery. They don't have much weapons, but they use them, and they barter this usage for their own benefit. Or the Palestinians have to stealthily cross the borders and attack Israel from the borders, while the Arab state or the people in control of the border backstab them. These are their options. The PLO, prior to Hamas, took option 1. They controlled the borders that they fought from. They controlled Jordan, then they controlled Lebanon, and this was bartered in exchange for the Oslo Accords to re-enter Palestine. Now, Hamas is a offspring of the Oslo Accords. Without Oslo, there is no Hamas, there is no Gaza, there was nothing inside Palestine. So whoever controls the borders gets paid for it. In the case of Lebanon, it's Hezbollah and the Lebanese state, because they're protecting Israel, and that's an expensive commodity and something you get well paid for. The rockets that were thrown in stealth. So the PLO took the option of control. Hamas has taken the option of stealth. Stealthily smuggling weapons to the border, and then Hamas and its coalition of Palestinian factions. The logic of that is the people who control these borders, which in this case is Hezbollah and the Lebanese state, will somehow be exposed, because they claim that they want to fight Israel and liberate Palestine, whereas they are actually policing for the Israelis, their northern border. So when we throw these few rockets, this will put them in a corner. How can you claim all of what you claim and then when there's a war, you do nothing? Actually, you go around trying to put whoever threw these rockets into jail. You know, for those of you who don't know, Lebanese law prohibits any Palestinian from approaching the border at the risk of being thrown in jail. Lebanese can go to the border, Palestinians cannot. And this is over and above Palestinians in Lebanon being besieged within their own camps. So you have to first of all escape the army siege of your camp and then reach the border, smuggle yourself and your weapons, and then go to jail if you're caught. So it's a sort of a farcical situation. It's funny. Why would anyone then go do that? The point being, because if you're interested in liberating Palestine, first of all, you'll cancel the law that outlaws Palestinians who approach the border, which is easy to do. Hezbollah can do it as the Lebanese state. They produced these laws. Instead, I go stealthily and I throw a rocket at the risk of being thrown in jail. Why would I do that? It's nothing that I can keep on doing anyway. The logistics are impossible. Because the logic is, this will expose them as liars. They don't want to liberate Palestine, they're patrolling the border. It doesn't do that. It's a wrong supposition. Lebanese are endemic liars and they're very arrogant about their lies. This is the basis of Lebanese society. And I'm of course not speaking of Lebanese individuals, I'm speaking of the Lebanese culture. How it works. It works by just sticking arrogantly and vehemently to lies. So you can't expose these people by doing that. So there's no use. And in fact, you either control these borders like the PLO did, or there's no use of all of this. And what's worse is the Palestinians within the Zionist state, the parts of Palestine occupied in 1948. These people, who are the Palestinian refugees outside of Palestine and Israeli citizens within, these are the most important, the crux of the Palestinian cause. You can't ask of them to go kill themselves for supporting prayers in Aqsa. That's wrong. The Palestinian cause, although Aqsa is a very important Palestinian monument, the Palestinian cause is not Aqsa, it's not Jerusalem. It is the refugees. It is the lands occupied in 1948 from which we were expelled. These people who are still in these lands have to be protected. You can't ask of them to support firing rockets from Gaza or Aqsa. That's not their job. Their job is to conserve their own strength and their culture and their identity, their Palestinian identity. That is what we should be doing, not militarily. They are worthless. There is no use of tiny Arab enclavements within a sea of Jews who can massacre them at any time. That is completely wrong. So we have to exit propaganda and become realistic. We are all alone in all of these battles, and we have to preserve the 1948 resonance and strengthen them as much as possible and not use them in any way to support our own policies. I'm speaking of Hamas and its coalition, and the end result of any battle in the current situation, the current balance of power, is going to be a negotiated solution. There's no use just condemning Oslo and then acting as if what we're doing is something else. It's all the same. The end result is going to be a negotiated solution. The balance of power dictates that. So preserve Palestinian identity, culture, and power as far as possible, and don't burn it out just to prove some point that is really not that worth it. Salam.